Brian Brady, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Nice. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. I have to thank Steve Gold over at the Things Police See podcast for the recommendation. He's like, hey, I interviewed a guy that I think you would resonate with, and he's an author. I think you should interview him. So I'm like, sure, why not? So here we are. Thank you, Steve. So let's start out with Brian. Where did you grow up?
Born and raised in San Francisco, Noe Valley neighborhood. Went to school there. Married a woman from the city. Uh, and then I actually started my police career in Berkeley. San Francisco at the time only would accept 2050 uncorrected vision to 2020. Or excuse me, we'll only take 2040. Mine was 2050, so
Uh,
I couldn't get on. So I ended up going over to Berkeley.
okay. Now, what year was that?
1969.
All right. Now,
Interesting times.
yeah, it sure was. What were your law enforcement influences like when you were growing up as a kid?
Probably the most influential was a San Francisco homicide inspector by the name of Jack Cleary. Jack grew up on Dolores Street, which is where I grew up, obviously, about three doors down from me, and he's older. So he was a San Francisco police officer. And when I was, in my early teens, uh, Jack worked the neighborhood, so he'd be in a black and white. You'd see him. And then he made general works detail as an inspector and then homicide. So and the families were close. It was a very Irish enclave in that neighborhood,
Yeah.
and everybody knew everybody. So I saw him frequently, and so he was kind of a mentor and pushed me in that direction. And he ultimately told me to go to Berkeley. I had qualified to be hired by a couple of departments, and I had been given multiple job offers. And I went to him, and he said to take Berkeley because Berkeley would give me a better foundation as an investigator because they were a generalist department where the beat officers handled all the calls from start to finish.
Oh, wow.
So
Okay.
yeah, and so that's how I ended up over in Berkeley, and then from there, I went down to East LA and spent a couple of years as a lieutenant in the city of Baldwin Park,
Yeah.
which is about city of about 85,000 out in East LA. From there to New Mexico, spent 4 years as a captain with the Farmington Police Department in the Four Corners, and then back to the Bay Area to Novato, where I was a captain and then appointed chief and served for 12 years as chief before I retired in '03.
Outstanding. Now, what did your mom and dad say when you say, "Hey, I'm going to be a cop"?
Um, Not a problem.
Okay.
My dad had been an auxiliary police officer during the Second World War. Uh,
Oh, okay.
Family history. My mom had contracted tuberculosis, so she was, as a matter of fact, she was in a sanitarium. That was the way they treated TB patients,
Right.
isolated. So she required care, and when she was released from back to home, so my dad was exempted from military service at that point to care for her. So in return, he volunteered then as an auxiliary police officer in San Francisco to supplement the police department while the officers served. So I had a
Oh.
little background there.
Yeah, so you saw dad in uniform and all that kind of good stuff, right?
Actually not. By the
Really?
time the war ended, I hadn't been born yet. So I'm a
Oh.
post-World War II baby. So he had, served his tenure as an auxiliary by that time.
Mm. What do you do for a living?
He was a brewer. Worked for initially Rainier Brewery and then Lucky Lager, which ultimately got bought by Labatt's out of Canada.
Oh.
And they uh, they had a tendency to gobble up little smaller breweries and then close them. So fortunately for him, when all that happened, he was near the end of his career, 40 years in the business. So he retired about that time.
Gotcha. Now, were mom and dad both Irish immigrants?
Dad is, passed away a few years ago. My mom was actually born in the city to Irish immigrant parents. Her dad was actually jumped ship. He was a sailor
Okay.
on a three-masted sailing ship, and he jumped ship in 1904 to stay in San Francisco.
Oh, wow. That's interesting. Yeah, both my mom and dad are from Mayo. Where's your dad from? Where was he
My
born?
dad's from Cavan, and my mom's folks are from Dundalk.
Okay. Cool. Yeah, we are talking a little bit before I hit record. So, yeah, we've got a lot in common, a lot of Irishness going on. So, I'm not surprised we both wound up being cops. That's not a big shock. You're
Either that or priests.
priest. Oh, that's a badge of honor. My mom, oh my God, my little Irish Catholic mom, she's 4'10", 100 pounds. And I'd come home, I'm in high school or college, and I'd be like, man, I'm done dating. This girl thing is not working out. And I'm gonna become a priest. And her eyes would just light up. It was like, oh, you could do worse, Patrick. And I'm like, no, mom, I'm joking. I like girls. No, 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 that ain't gonna happen.
Yeah, but yeah, you had a large, Irish Catholic family, and there were a couple of boys in there. Somebody was going to the priesthood,
Yeah.
whether they wanted to or not.
Yeah. Like I said, it was kind of a badge of honor. It was like bragging rights for little Irish mothers. It was like, oh, my son is a priest. That's just the way it was. So you're growing up. You have the neighbor down the street that's the copper. He's kind of steering you in the right direction. How soon after high school did you go to Berkeley?
Actually, I started kind of an odd story, but I started when I was 20,
Okay.
and you had to be 21 to be a police officer. So Berkeley hired me at 20 and put me in the academy, and I turned 21 while I was in the academy.
Oh, okay.
So I started as what they call a trainee, and then graduated as an officer. So I was, just barely old enough to be a cop when I was appointed, and then graduated from the academy. And from there, I went to the way Berkeley is set up. Berkeley is a one-officer car system.
Hmm.
So when you went to the street from the academy, there was no real FTO program at that
Oh,
time.
geez. They just
They
flip you
hand
the
you the
keys
car.
and,
Yeah, they
and
give you the
off
car
you go.
keys, and fortunately, because Berkeley was very progressive, we actually had handheld radios in 1969, which a lot
Wow.
of agencies did not. And Berkeley, to their credit, had invested in Motorola radios. And agencies around us that did have radios did not have Motorola. They had some, Oakland, for instance, they had radios that they were probably most effective throwing at people because they
Yeah.
didn't work. Uh,
The big
but we
old
had
bricks.
radios that actually worked, and that
Yep.
was pretty nice. So three of us were plucked out of the academy and put in Metro or Patrol Special Detail, which was a two-officer car assignment, and you were partnered up with a very senior officer who had worked their way into that special assignment.
Mm.
So I ended up with working with or for, depending how you want to look at it, a very senior officer who proceeded to make my life a living hell for 8 weeks. I could do nothing right. I shouldn't be a police officer. No one should be considered to be a police officer until they're at least 25.
Oh, okay.
And he believed in what he used to call the ding method, that you could never do anything totally right. He could find something to ding you on. I've told this story where we were walking on Telegraph Avenue, which is right next to the Cal campus. It's bookstores and bars and restaurants and that sort of thing. And it's where every movement started, ended up, passed through. And as we're walking along, this guy runs up behind a woman, knocks her down, grabs her purse, and takes off. So, I can't believe I just, witnessed a purse
Right.
snatch. So I take off after the guy, and I chase him for about 2 blocks. Finally tackle him, get the cuffs on him, get the purse back. My partner's there, and we're standing this guy up. There's a car coming by to transport him, and I'm feeling pretty good. On
Heck
view
yeah.
felony arrest, and got the property back.
Right.
And he starts in. You left me. You should have waited. So there's two of us. Literally, you didn't look both ways when you ran across the street. You did this wrong. You did that. I mean, it was like did you watch the movie Bull Durham?
Yes. Yeah.
And you remember when the young pitcher has a really good inning and he comes back to the dugout and he sits down and he's feeling really good and he turns to the catcher and the catcher says, "Your fastball was up, your curveball was hanging, and this showed that it lit you up." And he looks at us and says, "Couldn't you just let me have the moment?" That's exactly how I felt.
Well, and back then, I imagine that all your reports were handwritten and you did all the writing, I would imagine.
Oh, no, no. Not in Berkeley. You typed them.
Really? Okay.
Everything was typed. And we had a report writing room, and the typewriters in the report writing room, they looked like the Royal and Underwood typewriters that Clark Kent used in the Superman show. They probably took 60 pounds of pressure to move a key.
Yeah.
So you would come off graveyard shift, and you're tired. It's 8 o'clock in the
Right.
morning, but you've got 3 or 4 reports you got to write.
Yep.
So you sit down and no copy machine, carbon copies.
Yep.
So you get your original, and if you have 4 carbon copies, you put your carbons, you put them in, and you use type. And of course, you have to have multicolor correcting ink or
Oh,
correcting
oh,
because you're
white out,
blank.
pink out,
So
green out. Oh, heck
all
yeah.
that stuff for each of the copy.
Yep.
And of course, after you type this epic, you pull it out of the typewriter and you realize you had the carbons in backwards.
Yep.
So now it's 10 o'clock, and
uh,
you go to the sergeant on day shift and say, Sarge, can I use the copy machine in records to copy this report because I put No, you're too stupid. I'm not going to reward stupidity. Retype it. So you go back. So there were many days I didn't get out of there till noon, and there was no peace officer bill of rights then. There was no overtime.
oh,
You
there
just
wasn't.
knew.
Oh.
And if when you went to the senior sergeant on day shift and said, "Could I have overtime?" They looked at you and said, "Why? If you were competent, you would have finished your work at 8 o'clock. I'm not going to reward incompetence."
Oh
So you just
man.
sucked it up and went home.
It just you're all these memories come flooding back to me because we had two typewriters at the district station that I worked at. I started in 95, so this goes we didn't like become technologically advanced for quite some time. And all of our reports were handwritten with carbon paper. And you go to Office Depot or wherever and buy your own carbon paper and keep it in your locker because that's the good carbon paper because the stuff out in the assembly was garbage.
Oh, and well, it was getting used by
Yep.
all everybody. It was the carbons were, like you said, good carbons are worth their weight in gold. And if you found a
Yep.
good carbon, you treasured it. You put it in your
Yeah.
briefcase. You took it home with you.
Oh yeah.
Um, so it was, yeah, it was a different time. But I still think back. We had a typing class in the academy, believe it or not. And
Really?
I thought,
Okay.
what a waste of time this is. I want to
Mm-mm.
learn about catching bad guys. I want to learn this. Why don't
Yeah.
you wait? Little did I realize that was the most valuable class in the entire academy.
Oh,
Mm,
all day long. We had two typewriters at the district station, and I would go grab a typewriter, and all these cops are like, "What are you doing?" I said, I'm going to type my report. I'm not going to handwrite it. My handwriting is like hieroglyphics. The poor
that's it.
nuns, would be slapping my hands. It's like either you're going to become a doctor or you're going nowhere. You're stupid, Patrick. And I'm just like, "Ah, yeah." So I would type because I took typing in high school. And the only reason I took it because there was a lot of cute girls in there. And I'm like, oh, okay. There was like me and maybe one or two other guys, and the rest was girls. And I'm like, I'm
Well,
not stupid.
I
And I
was I was at an all boys Jesuit high school, so I didn't we didn't
Oh,
have typing.
I always said that if I went to an all boys school, I probably would have became an astronaut or a doctor or something like that because I'd be focused on my studies, not on the
That was
girls.
kind of the theory.
Who knows?
There's several of us that proved them wrong.
Yeah. But I mean, just one more thing about the handwritten reports and all that. I I had a FTO. He was a decent guy, but he loved overtime. Loved, loved, loved it.
Hmm,
So we wouldn't put pen to paper literally till 8 o'clock in the morning. We were easily there till like noon, 1, 2, 3, 4
sure.
o'clock, whatever, doing reports. And we had a sergeant, we called him Sergeant Cigar because he always had a cigar in his mouth. And he would be the acting lieutenant sometimes, and he's the day shift guy. So it's like going to the principal or a teacher. You're done with your report, and they have to approve it. They got a red pen in their pocket. They're not afraid to use it. And Sergeant Seagar looks at my FTO, and he just giggles, and then my FTO starts giggling. I'm like, what's going on here? So he takes out a lighter. He sets my report on fire. I spent 2 hours writing this report.
Yeah, I mean,
He right in front of me, he's like holding up like that, and they're both just cackling away. And it's not like there's no save button on a handwritten report.
nope. There's and the senior sergeant, when you came off graveyard shift, I mean, you had a senior sergeant on your shift, but the senior sergeant on day shift was it's kind of like the sergeant major in the military. I mean, this
Oh
is
yeah.
the person who had the most tenure on the agency, probably the most time and grade, and literally was untouchable. I mean, and most of the lieutenants deferred to those senior sergeants. I mean, because they'd been there so long, they
Oh
knew where all the bodies were buried.
yeah.
And they knew the systems. And the senior sergeant on day shift, he was gruff. He looked like the senior sergeant should look.
Yes.
He was a big man, really smart guy. Uh, he he would everyone walked very carefully around him. He ruled by fear. But once you got to know him, you realized how truly smart he was. Because I watched him on day shift. We had a child abduction, and it turns out to be a parental deal where the father took the kid, didn't bring the kid back, left the air, but it involved airline flight, it involved multi-agencies, it involved, and I watched him run that. And he was on the phone with the FBI, he was with FAA, he was with other agencies, he was in total control, and he was juggling 10, 12 balls at the same time.
Yep.
And, I came away with a whole new respect for this guy. Still feared him,
Yeah.
but I absolutely respected his talent. And then I realized he's in that spot because he really does know what he's doing. He is
Hmm.
really good. Uh, and you also had to, when you work day shift overtime, you had to go to him and ask his permission to sign up for day shift overtime. And then if you signed up for an 8-hour shift, he would only approve 4 hours. And he had to ride with you for those
Oh.
4 hours to see if you measured up to be able to
Oh.
work overtime on his shift, not the day shift,
Right.
his shift. And
Wow.
so yeah, yeah, he definitely controlled.
See, I was lucky. I got on in 95 and we had a good chunk of officers and bosses that were Vietnam era. They were Vietnam vets. They were towards the end of their careers. My captain was a Marine. He always had a Marine Corps coffee mug and a cigarette, in his hand. And then the day shift sergeants, like 2 out of 5 were Marine Corps Vietnam vets and a bunch of the coppers too. And you know what? Those cops were some of the nicest guys I ever met. They're always trying to help me. They were very kind compared to the late shift cops that had like 4 or 5 years on that were complete dicks to me. They were assholes.
It was, it was a difficult time. I mean, I'm preceding you, and I can share that, I was there working in the early 70s when law enforcement, pivoted. I mean, up until 72, there were no women working the street as patrol officers.
Right.
This was a whole new concept. And for the most part, the agency was white and male.
Yep.
There were very, very few minority officers, no women. So when there was a push to try and make the agency more reflective of community, then we added people. And as we did, some of the stalwarts who were opposed to any kind of movement out of the white male bastion were highly critical of these people, saying, well, they weren't measuring up to the standards. And what they completely failed to realize was a lot of these young officers coming on, because we lost a lot of people at that time and the departments expanded, instead of being on midnight shift, where they'd be the slowest shift and learn the ropes for 2 years, they were on midnight shift for two time periods, 16 weeks. And then they went to the busiest shift on the department on swing shift.
Wow.
So they had almost no time to learn.
Sure.
And then they got tossed into the fire. And then people said, well, see, they don't measure up. Well, no, wait a minute. You're taking somebody who spent 2 years learning
Right.
the ropes, comparing to somebody who had 16 weeks to try and learn the ropes. It's not really a fair comparison. It's not an apples to apples.
Right.
It was an interesting time as we were grappling with the change in the interior of the organization as well as things going on. I mean, like you talked about, we were coming out of Vietnam at that time. Weather Underground, SDS, bombings, terror. I mean, we were in the middle of all of that, and politically things were changing. They had a lot. They changed the voting age to 18. So in what, 72, I think.
Mm.
And so all of a sudden on city council elections, you had 18-year-olds who were going to Cal, voting because they lived in Berkeley
Oh,
on,
sure.
on city councils. So you had a pretty dramatic change in the politics simply because you had an infusion of all these new voters from 18 to 21 that couldn't vote.
Oh, okay.
So yeah,
I
so
never thought of that.
it
Yeah,
was a
that's
interesting time.
that's very interesting. So late 60s you get on in Berkeley. How big of a department was it?
At the time, we were 230 officers, a pretty good sized department.
Okay, how big was Berkeley? About 100,000 people or?
About 110,000, 120,000 plus 30 to 40,000 at Cal.
Yeah, I was
30
just gonna say
30,000 at that time. It's over 40 now.
the college would be a big chunk of that. I mean, was it what you thought it would be? I mean, obviously, you knew what was going on in the world and everything else, and it's like, well, I'm going to be a cop where there's like the most stuff going on.
Well, yes, I wasn't shocked by what was going on. Um, UC Police Department exists unto itself. The University of California has its own police department,
Hmm.
and they have like a police chief at each of the campuses. And the Berkeley campus is the oldest, it's the original Cal campus, it's the largest department. So the Berkeley UC department is probably 100 personnel. So it's a
Oh,
it's a good sized agency.
yeah.
And they police the campus, which is relatively small, and then they have jurisdiction 1 mile around the campus.
Mm.
So we worked very closely with them because Telegraph Avenue, which was the hotbed, was within that mile radius. So frequently we would pair up with UC cops for walking beats and that sort of thing.
Oh, okay.
So you learned to appreciate that. And Cal itself, they had dorms that were in the city limits. So if it was outside of the university property,
Ah,
there'd be a 6-story dorm that would be on your beat, and that would be your responsibility. And the parking structure that went along with it, et cetera. Now that's changed. Today, those dorms and the parking structures are part of the University of California campus, and they're policed by the UC police, not the Berkeley police.
mm.
So, but at that time, they were ours. And so even though you could have a beat that would have 1 and 2 story buildings on it, and then in the middle of your beat with this 6-story structure with 1,500 students living
Oh,
in it.
wow. Yeah.
And you can imagine just on 1,500 people living together, the thefts that occur, the
Oh,
burglaries that occur, the bicycles that get stolen, and that was all your responsibility.
yeah. Plus, there's going to be suicides. There's going to be sexual assaults. There's going to be, all kinds
All
of
of the
stuff.
above. Yep.
Yeah, there's going to be all of that stuff. So I'm thinking back, at that point in time, what did they give you for equipment? Do you remember, like when you first started?
Yeah. Yeah. Let's see. They issued you a briefcase because you needed to put your paperwork in something. Uh, you were issued a handheld radio, as I was saying earlier. Berkeley actually had Motorola radios then, and that was remarkable because most agencies did not.
Right.
So you had a handheld radio, uh, you had a baton,
Just a long piece of
26-inch
oak.
wooden,
Yeah.
well, plastic. I think they were wooden when I started. They converted to plastic.
Oh, okay.
Then mace. You have a canister of mace,
Oh, okay.
and revolver, and that's it. You had no shotgun. In Berkeley, if you worked certain details, you could check out a shotgun, but that had to be approved by a supervisor, and you
Okay.
had to be trained how to use the weapon, etc. So yeah, that was pretty much it.
Did
Our
you had
cars we didn't have cages. You
oh
transported prisoners in the front seat with you.
oh
Uh,
wow.
So no body armor that hadn't been invented yet. Uh,
Dang.
so and then depending on your supervisor, some of them thought we had to wear a hat
That
anytime
was
you're
my next
outside the
question. Do you have
car.
to wear a hat when you were outside of the car?
But some sergeants thought you should wear a hat inside the car as well
Oh
and
God.
wanted to enforce that rule. And those of us that were
Oh,
over 6 feet tall tried to explain to them that in wearing a hat in the car, our argument was, first off, we hated it. But
right.
the argument was it restricted our peripheral vision because we couldn't look side to side because the hat hit on the visor. So, but we did have to wear them outside the car. And you get dinged for that if you were outside the car without your hat.
Wow. Now, what kind of cars were you guys driving around in?
That was one thing Berkeley did not do well.
Okay.
Up until 1963, I want to say, Berkeley police officers drove their own cars. You had a car with a red light, a siren, and a radio. You owned the car and you got paid mileage to drive the car on duty.
Wow.
So the cars were mix and match. They weren't necessarily, police colors. They were just police cars. Then Berkeley went to initially black and white Plymouth in the middle 60s, then to white Plymouths in 68.
Mm,
And that's when people were buying the Chrysler products with the 440 Magnum V8 engines. The Highway Patrol had these monster
sweet.
cars.
Yeah.
Not Berkeley. We bought the smallest engine they had, which as an administrator, it actually made sense. It was fuel economical. And Berkeley's only 10 square miles.
Okay.
You weren't going to get in too many long distance pursuits.
Right.
So having an engine that actually was a little more fuel efficient wasn't necessarily a bad idea. So we had those. Then they bought Fords. And again, they were white, had a Berkeley shield on the door, one red spotlight, no other lighting on the car, and a siren. And an amber light on the deck, rear deck, so you could, if you were stopped, someone didn't run into you. And they kept those, and then they bought AMC Matadors because LAPD bought those. And actually, they weren't that bad a car.
Hmm.
They stopped, they had decent brakes because the Fords didn't, and they ran okay. And they went to pastel colors at that point. So we had beige, green, blue, white.
Wow.
Then they went to somebody lost their mind in purchasing, and they bought in the middle 70s the Chevy Novas,
I
the,
remember those.
the,
Yeah.
the 350 cubic inch dual exhaust
Yep.
little Nova that didn't weigh anything. The thing was a rocket ship.
Yep.
Uh, and we'd never had cars like that. And of course, we wrecked them because we didn't know how to drive them. So, but we moved on. Now Berkeley has, they drive, they're back to black and whites,
Mm,
and they drive the Ford
probably.
Explorers
Yeah.
now
Probably
primarily
Explorers. Yeah.
in the Blazers and with the cages and they're back in the mainstream. So they changed that several years ago. I mean, I still stay in touch with people in the department. They have a retirees group that I belong to, even though I technically didn't retire from Berkeley. If you left the department in good standing, you can be an auxiliary member of the retirees. So I still get to see a lot of old friends and kind of stay up with what's going on.
So, how many years were you at Berkeley as a police
Nine,
officer? 9.
nine,
And
yeah.
did you promote at all, or did you stay?
Yeah, I left as a sergeant.
Best
Uh,
job on the department, I think. But
I can tell you, you're right. I totally agree with you. And probably the most important job in the department. Instructor that was teaching a class when I was a administrator. We had police chiefs and deputy chiefs in the class, and he asked that question: "Who's the most important person in the police department?" And of course, all the chiefs said the chief, and all the deputy chiefs said the deputy chief because the chief doesn't do anything and they do all the work. And you had the usual. And finally, the instructor said, uh, "No, it's a sergeant. You're all wrong. It's a patrol sergeant." And everybody, oh, can't be. And he said, "Okay, tell you, here's an example. Now, you know who Stacy Coons is.
Mhm.
He was the sergeant who didn't act when Rodney King got beaten in Los Angeles.
Right.
So, as the instructor pointed out, Tom Bradley was the mayor of Los Angeles for 5 terms. For 4 of those 5 terms, he tried to fire Daryl Gates as the police chief unsuccessfully. Stacy Coons got him fired in a minute and 41 seconds.
Yeah, you're right. That's
That's
very
it.
true.
One sergeant not doing his job, and that Chief Gates was gone.
Yeah, that's I
But
never thought of it that way, but I always thought the sergeants were the ones who steered the boat. You know,
you do,
yeah,
no
all day
question.
long. And that was when I was a younger cop, I'm like, yeah, I want to be a sergeant. And for two reasons. One, you had role models that were or mentors that were just crackerjack. They were great. And then you had the ones that were incredibly deficient. And I'm like, I don't want him or her bossing me around later on.
Yeah, I think by the time you promote to sergeant, hopefully you've got a pretty good idea of what you want to see in that sergeant. What
Right.
you would like to have, and that you could be that person. And I totally agree with you. I think you have the ability to really influence young people coming up in the department because you're getting, especially on the midnight shift, you're getting all the new people. So you are their first exposure to the agency
Right.
and what it's all about. And you're going to instill in them the values of the department and the values of law enforcement. And then you have the ability to be intimately involved in the most complex cases, et cetera, just because you're on the street and you're close to it. And then ultimately, if things just go to hell in a handbasket, there's always a lieutenant to kick it upstairs to. So
Yeah.
you're not making the final decision. You find out, or I found out, once you get to be the chief, there's nobody to kick it upstairs to anymore. Like Truman said, the buck stops here. When it lands on your desk, you got to make a decision and live with it
Yeah,
because
that's
there's nobody to save you.
those are lonely at the top moments. Yes,
Yeah,
I do understand.
and your decision making at the top is really limited. The sergeant has a myriad of options. I mean, like you said, you get to the scene and you can make a decision. Yes, arrest. No, don't arrest. Cite. Uh, we're going to take a report. No, we're not going to take whatever the case may be. But there's probably 10, 12, 15 options.
Oh
So
yeah.
you make your decision. And maybe somebody complains. It gets appealed. So the lieutenant steps in. So all the lieutenant has to do, he has to make a decision on your decision.
Yes.
So, by the time it gets to the chief, it's down to usually one of two choices because it's been filtered through all the levels. So you really don't get to go back to square one and determine if the initial call was great because that's already been handled at 3, 4 levels below you. And so your decision making is really restricted compared to that sergeant who had all those options on the first go around.
Well, it was always interesting to me. I was incident commander for 7 different officer-involved shootings where a cop had to shoot and kill somebody. And the last two, I was a block away when they happened. And you're the incident commander. For those who don't know, you move all the chess pieces. You make sure that this scene
Hmm.
is like locked down like you wouldn't believe. It's safe. You know, you're trying to get extra resources. You're making a ton of phone calls, and you know the chief of police is going to be there. That's just, and he or she is going to, the first person they go to is going to be you. What's going on? What do I need to know? Before they talk to the press, before anything,
Sure.
they're going to that sergeant that's got a clipboard or another cop that's their scribe that has better handwriting. That's what I always did. So, all right, yeah, you look like you have good handwriting. You are now my shadow. You're going to write down everything I tell you to write down. We're going to keep track of this gigantic scene. And it was always interesting to me because you would have command staff come, and the ones that were good, hey, Sarge, what's going on? X, Y, and Z, blah, blah, blah. All right, thanks. We're going to do this. Okay. But then you'd have some that would come by because they wanted to get promoted and they wanted to look like they were doing something in front of the chief. And they start like barking orders at you. And then whenever they started doing that, I'd stop and I'd put my hand up and I'm like, do you want to be the incident commander? Here's the clipboard. Here's my scribe. Have at it, sir or ma'am. And that would shut them up like that immediately. Well, I don't want to be in charge. I'm like, of course you don't. Then, unless
I
it's
just want to look
something.
like it.
Right. I just want to look like I'm doing stuff, So you really start to see the politicking and all the ugliness of command staff once you get to that rank as well, and
Yeah.
especially at a major scene.
And it doesn't change when you leave law enforcement. When I left law enforcement, I went in the private sector and I spent almost a dozen years working in corporate security. And, I had a great job. I was the head of security for NBC Universal in Los Angeles. And we have a theme park, Universal Studios Hollywood. We've got a movie studio. We've got movie productions worldwide. We've got NBC News. So we have all of these things going on. And when something happens and you're there, much like your sergeant you were talking about, you have phone calls to make. You need to talk to the president of studio operations. You may need to talk to the CEO of the company. You want to talk to company this size, you've got a press officer. You've got to get the press officer involved. You've got the image of the company to protect. You want to be sure that hopefully that the story is not page one in the LA Times and it reads on page 12 under arts and entertainment. All these things are so it's interesting when you bring that up about law enforcement. It transcends into the corporate world as well. You have that on-scene commander has almost the same responsibilities.
That's very interesting to me. And and the thoughts of leadership really come in. I'm a huge Jocko Willing fan. I love his is the dichotomy of leadership, I think was the name of his book. It's outstanding. All of
Hmm.
his books are great. But ultimately, if there's a screw up somehow, it's the chief's fault because the chief is the one who sets the tone of the culture. They're the ones who promote. They're the ones who, blah, blah, blah. And I'll give a quick example. I was off. I come back from my off days. I'm day shift. I'm in charge of the special cars at the district. And the lieutenant's like, hey, Pat, just so you know, Captain's fuming right now. Your cops did X, Y, and Z. Oh, okay. I'll go in there right now and talk to him if you want me to. Yeah, wait till he gets his coffee and he calms down a little bit. And I'm like, okay. So I go in there, I knock on the door. I'm like, Cap, you want to see me? Yeah. Close the door. I'm like, here we go. Nothing good comes from close the door. But yeah. So he's like, hey, your guys did, X, Y, and Z, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, my fault. And he looks at me and he says, well, you were off yesterday. I don't care. They're my guys. It's my fault. So guess what? I'm going to talk to them. I'll take whatever action needs to be taken and we'll just move on from there. So it was like I popped a balloon because he was just getting ready to just to ram it right up their asses. And I'm
Yeah,
just like, no, this is me. It's all me.
when there was a story that they tell you when you, at least in my case, when you walked into the chief's office, the story is that you sit down at your desk and you open the desk drawer, and it says there's an envelope, and it says to be opened in the event of a crisis. So you open it, and it has three envelopes inside the main envelope, and they're numbered one, two, and three, and they're to be opened when there's a crisis. So the first crisis that comes up, you open the envelope, it says blame your predecessor. The second crisis comes up, it says blame the police union. The third crisis comes up, and you open the envelope, it says prepare three envelopes.
I love
So
it.
you get three crises and you're gone.
Oh my
So
gosh.
and that's not too far from correct. I had the pleasure of serving on a panel with the sheriff of the county, who is a personal friend and a great sheriff. And he and I were answering questions from the community. And one of the community members said, um, "Well, Sheriff, we understand you have to run for office, and yours is a political position, but police chief's position, those aren't political." And the sheriff Bob looked at me and said, "You want me to answer that?" I said, "Yeah, go ahead." He said, "Well, let me see if I can put this in perspective." He said, "The city has a city council of 5 members." He said, "In Brian's case, if he pisses off 3 of the 5, he's unemployed." He said, "As the sheriff, I've got to piss off 51% of the county."
Yeah.
So he said, "The police chief's position is much more political than the sheriff's position, even though the sheriff runs for office. The police chief is much more tenuous simply because if you piss off the swing vote, you're gone."
Oh, absolutely. The police chief, you're the political pinata. And, I wanted to talk about this a little bit later, and we will. But I kind of want to move backwards just a little bit. So
Sure.
you leave Berkeley and you go to Baldwin Park.
Hmm.
Why did you do that?
At the time, I was frustrated on the. I had taken the lieutenant's test in Berkeley, and I passed it, and I was on the list, but it was obvious I wasn't going to make it off that list. They think I've anticipated on that list they made me make 3 promotions, and I wasn't one, two, or three. So I wanted to promote. I wanted to move up. So Baldwin Park had an open competitive lieutenant's test. So anybody who was a sergeant in California, basically with enough tenure, could apply for the position.
So you could just do
And
a lateral then. That's interesting.
basically, because CalPERS, which is the California Public Employees Retirement System, almost all cities belong to that system.
Mm.
So your pension can move with you. I could go to Baldwin Park and just continue to pay into my pension and accrue my pension with the state pension system.
Okay.
So that makes the movement a little easier.
Oh yeah.
So I tested and got the position and then moved down to LA and spent 2 years working there.
Okay, so you were there for a couple of years. Then your next stop was Farmington, New Mexico
Yeah,
for 4 years. That's a
that's
big move.
it was a huge move, and it was kind of a lark in a way. I saw the position advertised in I think it was Police Chief Magazine or Western Cities Magazine, and I thought, well, it's a captain's position, kind of interesting. I'll put in for it. What have I got to lose? A good friend of mine who was LAPD, who had been a cop with me in Berkeley, his wife was from Farmington. So I knew a little bit about the area and I was picking her brain. So anyway, I tested and I got the job. So be careful what you wish for. All of a sudden, it's a move to a new state. It's a whole new system.
Oh
You
yeah.
have to get certified and you have to go through an academy and not a full academy, but you have to be certified through New Mexico and a new department, a new culture, a new area. It was a big jump. I'm glad I did it. I mean, I love the community there. They were great. The department wanted to modernize. The department wanted to embrace new technology. I had good, young, talented cops, and the city manager supported us. And the council supported us. We had a pretty good deal.
Wow. So how long were you there?
4 years.
4 years. And then you went back to California, eh?
Hmm.
To
I moved
Nevada.
back to Nevada. Yeah, I did stayed there for 20 years. They first mm, up until I made chief. Yeah, I was a captain,
Okay.
and then when I was appointed chief in '92, and I stayed till the end December of '03. Uh, the only, and as far as you said, moving with pension, I was back in the California system. I lost the years in New Mexico. There's no
Mm,
reciprocity,
yeah.
but and then by '03, I had reached the point where I had maxed my pension.
Okay.
So I had 35 years in the business, but enough in the California system that if I continue working past that, you're basically were making a donation because you weren't going to get any more pension out of it.
Right. Yeah. Wisconsin's the
So,
same way. You
yeah,
reach a certain point where it's like, okay, I'm working for pennies right now. This
yeah,
doesn't
and
make a lot
so
of sense.
that's when I decided to retire at that point, and then I went into the private side.
Gotcha. Now, Novato, I looked it up. It's about a town of 60,000 people, somewhere in that ballpark.
Mhm.
Geographically, where is it's close to San Francisco, right?
Yeah, it's about 30 miles north of San Francisco. It's in Marin County. It's the last city in Marin County. It borders Sonoma County,
Okay.
and it was probably the newest city to develop in Marin County, just because of as you move further away from San Francisco, the cities in Marin County to develop first were, Sausalito is right over the bridge,
Okay.
and then Mill Valley, and then San Anselmo and San Rafael, and it worked its way up north to Novato. And we had probably about 600 San Francisco police and firefighters living in our city limits.
Oh, okay.
So,
How
and
big
that
of
was
a
because
how big of a department was that when you got there?
we were about 100 personnel, about 60 to 70 sworn,
Okay.
and about 30, 35 civilians.
Okay.
Uh,
Did it stay
and
around there or did it grow?
I'm sorry?
Did it stay around those numbers
Yeah,
the time you were
it
there?
stayed, it's probably, when I got there, it was closer to 50,000. It's now 60 something thousand.
Yeah.
Um, but 29 square miles. It's got some geography.
Yeah.
Uh, and uh, it's primarily a bedroom community. It has a major shopping center, but primarily a suburban to San Francisco community, 30-mile drive back into the city.
Mm, okay. Now, about 100 people, you go, there's a captain. Did you promote from captain to chief, or was there like an
Yes.
assistant chief or inspector or
No, captain to chief. That was the jump.
that?
And
Wow, that's a big jump.
so. Yeah, but as a captain, you ran a division. So
Oh, okay.
there was two captains. One ran the administrative and service division. One ran patrol and investigations. So and you alternated. You
Mm.
would do the assignment for like 2 years, and then you would rotate. So each of the captains, by the time there was a chief position vacant, had worked and managed each element in the department. So they should have been ready to move up.
Now, did you see it as a benefit that you spent some time being a captain there before you got hired as chief?
Yeah, I think it's to use your example about being a new sergeant. Uh, I I had worked under a couple of chiefs at that point, and I knew what I liked about the way chiefs handled things, and I knew what I didn't like about the
Right.
way chiefs handled things. And so as you become the chief, hopefully you can incorporate the good stuff that you learned from the people before you and use that and uh, work to the betterment of both the organization and the community, and not screw up. And hopefully it's you watch other people make mistakes and okay, I don't want to do that. That was clearly catastrophic. So we'll try something different. And then you also don't want to be, I'm not ridiculing any chiefs or they want to put their imprimatur on an agency, and I did make changes, but you don't necessarily just want to make change for change's sake to be able to say,
I'm laughing
you know,
because every chief we've had has done that. Every one of
yeah,
them.
I'm going to paint the building sky blue pink because, it'll be my
Yep.
legacy. Um, so I think you talk to the officer. I think that's the most important thing. You want to meet with the officers, and we had a police association, police union, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
I set up our staff meetings on Tuesday. There was always a seat at the staff meeting for the POA president or his or her designee.
Mm.
And they had attendance at the meeting. They could vote on things. They could offer their 2 cents worth. The only thing they couldn't do was they couldn't sit in on personnel matters. If
Makes sense.
and that's just legal. You can't
Yeah,
do that.
that makes total
So
sense.
other than that, they had a vote just like a captain or a lieutenant or a sergeant at the meeting would have a vote. And so it gave me pretty good insight because they would bring things to the table that were of consequence. And one of the things they brought to the table, we had at the time white police cars, and they hated them. They wanted black and white. So we talked to the purchasing agent and did our homework and found out that we could buy our cars on contract with the Highway Patrol or with LA County Sheriff or LA City
Hmm.
if we went in and we can get the car. Actually, we get the cars cheaper in black and white on
Oh,
their
wow.
contract than we could. So gee, I'm a great chief. I actually saved the city money and
Yeah.
gave the officers what they wanted. So it doesn't. You don't have to be a rocket scientist to figure this out. So the officers are happier. They're driving cars that they like.
Sure.
And then we changed the logo on the car. It was pretty plain. And the officers pretty much voted on what they wanted to see on the side of the car. So now they're driving a car that's the right color and has the right logo. So they're happy about that. And the other thing we changed our badges. We had used kind of a state issue badge, and it really didn't say anything about your agency.
Mm.
So we converted to a much nicer, was more expensive badge that had Novato on it and was very unique to the agency. Again, what they wanted, and so they were again. Now you're driving a car you like. It's got the right logo, and you're wearing a badge that you're proud of, and you
Sure.
had say in how it happened. So I think you can make a lot of headway as the chief by asking the right questions and listening to the people who have got the boots on the ground.
Yeah, that's interesting. And we had both. I worked for 25 years in Milwaukee and I went through five chiefs. One of them came from out of jurisdiction. He came from Massachusetts. And, he brought Comstat. Did you have Comstat?
No, I have personally I have mixed feelings about Comstat. Um, I think it has value, uh, but I think the way some of the people handled it in New York and LA, where it was basically calling a station commander into a room in front of an audience and just ripping them. I don't know that that's productive. But I do think the statistical gathering is of great value. But I think sometimes the way it was handled left a bit to be desired. But that's
We
that's my 2 cents.
we called it the weekly flogging. It was no
Yeah,
different where we were at. It's like, how can I make you look really bad? And, again, you have command staff or say captain and above that are chomping at the bit to get promoted. Because, we have, captains and there's inspectors, then there's assistant chiefs, then, the chief.
yeah,
So they want to look good by making other people look bad. And the chief fed off of that. He loved it. Oh my God. He just thought that was the coolest thing ever.
yeah. And I don't. I mean, I the object of the game to me is to provide a level of service to the community and to improve on the delivery of that service. Can we do it faster? Can we do it better? Can we be more efficient? Can we let people in the community be more involved in the process? Can they have a say as opposed to just being policed to have a say in how the policing gets done? I think we miss the boat sometimes when we get too caught up in the stat, and then like you said, it's a flogging. You have some poor person there who's just getting beat up. Where to me, it's so much more beneficial to say, okay, captain, deputy chief, whatever, in your division, crime is really up in this reporting district over whatever time period. And then it should get, to me, you throw it up into the room because you've got all these other command staff in there. Let's hear some ideas of how we can help Captain so-and-so reduce crime in that area.
Yeah.
And everybody, but instead, it's just, you beat the poor person up, and, the captain goes out with their tail between their legs. And what they end up doing, sadly, and I don't know if it happened to you in Milwaukee, but I do know it happened in Los Angeles, where people in command start adjusting how things get reported.
Oh yeah, they do.
So all of a sudden, what previously was a felony
Yep.
becomes a misdemeanor. So it doesn't hit ComStat.
Correct.
And I think now we're doing ourselves and our community a disservice. And if anybody thinks for a minute that that officer driving the black and white doesn't see through what you're doing and doesn't see you as a fraud, and you lose stature over the people that you're trying to be a leader to, you're just cutting your own throat. And I don't think that's beneficial. And I think ComStat encouraged that.
I think you're 100% right. Nobody wants to get called on the carpet. Crime cannot go up. There's only one crime that you can't use smoke and mirrors, and that's homicide. And, you got a dead person that another human being has killed.
Yeah, and I'm sure you went through the same thing we did. Your clearance rate in homicide used to be 80% or better.
Ours was 95%. Now it's down to 50.
Yeah, the thing was though, in the day, if you were going to get killed, you got killed by somebody you knew. Uh, there weren't drive-by shootings. There weren't mass shootings. There weren't, these kinds of things where homicide numbers can spike and go through the ceiling on a situation where someone has no control over it. Uh, but most of the homicides were people committing a homicide on somebody they knew or were acquainted with or something, or in commission of furtherance of another crime. And those were relatively easy to solve. But now you're getting ones where, like you said, a drive-by shooting where there's three dead people on a street corner and nobody knows nothing.
Yeah,
And those go unsolved.
for when I started, it was the worst time ever for homicides. And, it
Mhm.
was the crack wars. We call it the
Yeah,
crack wars. Everybody was killing each other. It was just one rival gang killing another, one drug dealer killing another drug dealer. You can't sling crack on my block. Or you'd have the guy that would sell somebody ivory soap instead of crack
sure.
or drywall or whatever. That will buy you a bullet in your head. Or, I saw people getting killed over nickel bags
Yep.
of just marijuana. But the big driving thing was dope. Drug, illegal narcotics. That was huge. And you'll always have the family members, follow the greed, follow the jealousy, follow the money, follow
Yeah.
you know, yeah, you can connect the dots, but yeah, we're down to like 50%. A lot of people are literally getting away with murder right
Hmm.
now. And
And
it's sad.
it is sad. And we have such great technology right now to help us. I mean, thank God for DNA. I mean, you think
Oh
about it.
yeah.
I mean, and I've worked cold cases, and I've done it on the side for families of people that I know.
Sure.
And I have a very dear friend who's just finished working a cold case, retired, and the sheriff where he lives up in Montana asked him to look into a cold case, a 25-year-old murder of a 15-year-old girl, and he solved it. He broke it and found the suspect, but it's DNA. It's
Yeah.
DNA today that didn't exist 25 years ago. The technology,
Oh, it's
uh,
amazing.
if you didn't have a hair with the root follicle on it, you were out of business. Today, there's DNA labs in San Francisco that can take a hair that doesn't even have nothing remotely to a root, and they can do familial DNA off that and give you at least three possible suspects. I mean, it's incredible. It's
It
absolutely
is.
incredible.
It really is. But, I kind of want to go back a little bit. Why would you want to be a chief of police? Where's this drive coming from? You had this drive that you wanted to go to the top.
Well, you want to be in charge. I don't take orders well. I've always wanted to be the person making the decisions. Uh, and it allowed me to do things that I could never have done at a lower rank. And I was in the right place at the right time. An agency, when you're operating in an agency of, let's say, 100 to 200, you have the ability as the lead person to be a pretty dramatic influence on the organization. You are closer to the people on the street. Uh, you should have a much closer relationship with your supervisors and command staff. So you have your ear to the ground. If you're the police chief in New York, the police commissioner with 38,000 police
Yeah,
officers,
yeah.
how does the police commissioner of New York have any idea what's going on at the 15th precinct in Manhattan? And it's just overwhelming. Same with Los Angeles.
Right.
Um, Jim McDonnell's the police chief in Los Angeles. He's a good friend. He's a great chief. He's a great cop. And how do you police 10,000 police officers and there are 10,000 civilians and keep your finger on the pulse? And let's say you want to make a change, just like I did with the cars. I want the LA cars to go from this color to that color. Just a simple thing like that. You imagine what's involved
Yeah.
in a city the size of Los Angeles
Yeah.
and
That'd
changing
be
the
a
color of a police
boondoggle.
car?
Yeah.
So I had the ability to actually influence that and be much more intimately involved with the change. And hopefully to do change, make change that made the officers' lives better. Uh, we went to computers in the cars. We bought spell check because most of our guys couldn't spell.
Right.
So and that we all make that mistake, but the spell check's great. You got Grammarly now. You have all these reasons why the
Right.
reports. So it makes their job easier. We did various changes in the cars on the interiors of the cars based on what the officers wanted to try and make, 10 hours a day, that's their house. So you
Yep.
want to make that as efficient for them as humanly possible. So that as the chief, you have that opportunity. You have the ability and use it wisely. You can also screw it up. I mean, I'd love to tell you that in my 12 years as chief, I made all great decisions and I was, they're going to put a statue up in the lobby of me. I don't know that that's going to happen, but um, I think I made more good decisions than bad ones. And I think the department was better for my having been there. And I think the officers had better equipment. I think they were better able to do their job. So yeah, that's why to be able to actually be able to influence things.
I think if your heart's in the right place and you have the smarts, you're going to be a good chief. But you are the political pinata.
Oh,
There's no doubt about it. It all lands in your lap. And I think it should land in your lap if you're the chief. You set the tone, but it's comical if if you if you're around a police department long enough, you see the cycle where for us, the mayor falls in love with, person X. And it's like, okay, you're now police chief. Oh my God, they're just gushing. It's a love fest. Oh, you could do no wrong until things get icky. Something happens where the optics
sure.
aren't so great, and that mayor will turn their back on that chief in half a second. And they're like, how could this have happened? I saw it happen 5 times. Five
Well, the other
times.
thing too is, I'm assuming Milwaukee has a strong mayor that's elected independently of the council or the
Yes.
board of supervisors.
Yep.
In Nevada, as is the case with a lot of cities in California, under 500,000 or so, the mayor serves on the council, and the mayor is one of 5 or 7 council members,
Oh,
and then
okay.
they rotate the mayor assignment, over the 1 year at a time. So the city is actually run by a city manager or a city administrator, depending, and
Hmm.
that person is normally someone who's got at least a master's degree in planning or urban research or something along those lines where they know how to run a city.
Yeah.
Because a lot of council members have no idea how to run a city. Oftentimes they run on a single issue.
Right.
Uh, Somebody wants to build a homeless shelter in this neighborhood. So the council member hears, or the person who runs for council opposes it. And there's a significant number of people in the neighborhood who oppose it. So they elect that person, the council member, so they'll vote against the homeless shelter in their particular neighborhood. Okay, that's great. That's one issue. But there's a lot more things facing Milwaukee
Right.
or Nevada or San Francisco. But that
Sure.
council member is an expert on the location of a homeless shelter. They don't know anything about paving a street or a sewer system or a water
Yeah.
recovery. So the city manager should have that background. So anyway, long story short, sometimes a city manager comes in whose background may be park and recreation. It may be
Mm,
public planning. It
yeah.
could be public works. Could be police. Could be fire. But they cut their teeth in a particular department, and that's where their allegiance seems to be.
Sure.
So if
Yeah.
you have a city manager who came from public works and you're the public works director, you're probably in a pretty good spot on the budget compared to the
Right.
police
Right.
or the
I
fire
get
chief.
it.
So,
Yeah.
and it shuffles. I mean, and it's in it like you hit it right on the head. It's cyclical. It
Yes.
just depends on who's sitting in that seat.
Absolutely. So after being in, 4 different departments, you've done most jobs in a police department. What was your
Hmm.
favorite or least favorite?
Patrol sergeant by far.
Okay.
Uh, I I liked being on the street. I liked being close to what was happening. Uh, I liked being able to work with officers, um, to be able to teach, to be able to um, make them better cops. Uh, and ultimately, we end up. Uh, and I say this because Berkeley taught us, and people have you know, their thoughts. You mentioned, Madison, interesting place. Berkeley's an interesting place. However, historically, Berkeley has been at the cutting edge of law enforcement over the last 100 years.
Mm,
The first department to have radios in patrol cars, the first department to have motorcycle, first department to have police dog, first department to have a lie detector. We had a woman and black officer in the 20s. So the department did things way ahead of the curve. First, we
yeah.
had an MO system before the FBI did. Uh, so they taught us a lot about our history, and so you want to help be able to convey that to the new people. So being a street sergeant, you could do that.
Yeah. I wholeheartedly agree with you. So you retired from law enforcement, you went over to corporate security.
Hmm.
Now the one thing that's with television studios, correct?
Movie, TV,
Yeah,
theme
movie.
park, the whole thing.
What here's my big question, and I didn't have it written down, it just popped into my head when we were talking. How could the whole Alec Baldwin thing happen?
Oh,
Where's the breakdown?
well,
Where you have live ammunition on a set. That makes no sense to me whatsoever.
no, there's a myriad of screw ups on that, and you had an armorer who wasn't qualified. Uh, Big problem. That's now the armorer could have been really talented, but they weren't quote qualified. They didn't have the paperwork, and that's what there's no way that person should have been on a set handling a weapon
No.
without that. And I say this because I have a very good friend who is a weapons and effects person for the movie industry. And when that happened, he's the first person I called. And he said, "There's no way that should have happened." He said, if I was the armorer on that movie, that never would have happened." And uh, I watched him on movie sets, and he runs a tight ship. Any weapon is locked in a literally a vault, and he issues the weapon
Wow.
only after
I
he checks it. And so there are checks for this. How that happened, how that gun and that live ammo got is beyond me. The checks and for us at Universal, our checks and balances, that couldn't happen.
okay, yeah, I just that blew my mind when I saw that. But the same thing happened. Now I'm thinking, Brandon Lee, Bruce Lee's son. That's how he
Mhm.
died during the filming of The Crow.
Yeah,
I
and there's still a lot of questions about that one.
yeah, yeah.
Whether that was intentional or accidental.
But I
And
just
the
can't.
Baldwin one was obviously accidental, but the Bruce Lee one, there's still, and again, who knows? There's enough conspiracy theorists out there that
Oh yeah,
there's,
absolutely. So how
but
easy was it to re transition from retirement to working in the civilian world?
um, well, that's a really good question. The the transition wasn't that difficult. The corporate world is different, and you have to get a feel for the way things are done. I lucked out. I had arguably one of the best bosses I ever worked for at Universal, a guy named Jim Waters, who was the president of studio operations. And he was he was demanding in that he had uh, a criteria that he adhered to, and he wanted things done in a particular way. But he told you what the rules were. He told you what the consequences were. He told you how he wanted it done, and he supported you. Well, I can't ask for any more than that. Somebody tells you what the rules are, and he enforced the rules across the board. He was Honesty was paramount. Integrity was paramount. If you lied, cheated, or steal, you're gone. And that frequently people talk the talk. And when the janitor takes something, there's no trouble firing him. But when somebody up higher does something,
Ah,
it gets under the carpet. Well, I sat in with him and watched him fire a vice president for cheating on his expense account.
wow.
Now, yeah, and that wasn't like I'm going to give you two warnings. You stole, you're gone.
Okay,
And so I loved working for him.
sure.
Absolutely loved it. I mean, and he supported you. But you mentioned the closed door when you came into the captain's office.
Yeah.
He had a magnet on his door. So when you walked in, he could touch the magnet and the door closed behind you. And that was, when you walked in his office and when the door closed behind you, it was like, oh no. So fortunately, in my case, as the head of security, it was usually going to be one of two things. Either somebody screwed up or it was just something very confidential that he didn't want
Right,
anyone else to hear.
right.
And fortunately, vast majority of the time, it was something that was confidential. But great boss. So that made the move a lot easier because I knew what was expected of me.
Okay,
And he gave me some, again, same thing. He supported you. Um, he gave me a lot of latitude on hiring and the way I wanted to do things. I did make changes. I think I made it a little bit better. Uh, and I had good people. And we worked with some fabulous people. I mean, I loved my time down there. I had a lot of fun. And the movie industry is fascinating. It's a whole different world. I
oh,
mean,
I'm sure.
in the theme park's a whole different world. I mean,
Yeah,
you have millions literally of people coming through your doors every day. I mean, every year. And you've got to ensure their safety. You've got to ensure the
sure.
safety of all your employees. You've got massive parking lots. You've got, it's a little city unto itself.
Now, doesn't is LA County Sheriff's responsible for that?
Yes, to 85% of our property was in the county and
Okay.
15% was in the city. So that
Okay.
made life interesting because
Yeah.
not so much
Yeah.
for me, but for if we were going to do an expansion, let's say on one of our stages.
Yeah.
Well, you had to go to the county for part of the permitting and the city for part of the permitting, and so it could make life really exciting for our builders. But the law enforcement part, no, we had a really good relationship with LA County Sheriff and LA City
Okay.
PD. And we actually had a sheriff substation on the property.
That's what I thought. Yeah, yeah. I had
Yeah,
Cliff Yates on there on my
yeah.
show, and he worked that, and he said that was probably one of his favorite parts of working for the LA County Sheriff's.
It was a nice facility. You're actually for the most of the day you're in the park, most of the evening, and people like seeing you. I mean,
Right.
the people
They're
are
giving
happy
you
to
a
see you.
five finger
People are
wave.
happy.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a nice place to be. Occasionally, you got to deal with. We had three bars on our City Walk property, which is adjacent to the park, and those three bars had a total capacity of 3,000.
Oh.
So you can imagine what it looks like at 2 a.m. closing when you
Uh,
dump 3,000 bar patrons out onto one area and then into a parking lot to get vehicles. And on a Friday or Saturday night, you're going to have fights. You're
oh
going to
yeah.
have drunks. You're going to so the sheriff's that part of the assignment was a little stressful, and of course part of it was in the city of LA. So one of the bars, the parking lot was in the county, and the bar itself was in the city.
Oh,
So you end up getting partnered up with LAPD, LA Sheriff, and they work really, really well together up on our property. They were great.
well, that's good. That's good. So you did that for a while, and you were also security at it was a art museum, or where was
Yes.
that?
San Francisco Museum of Modern Art. Art museum, about 50,000 square feet of art space. They decided to enlarge. They bought some property. They built from a 3-story to an 11-story. Went from 50 to 165,000 square feet of art. We are now the museum now is right next to MoMA in New York, size-wise, as far as
Wow.
modern art. And so I was there as we built it out and put the security in and set up the systems and all for the new museum. That was another interesting job. Totally different world.
Yeah, I would have no clue how that would even work. That just seems so daunting to me.
It's at Universal. If you were going to steal $1 million worth of our property, you'd have to bring in an 18-wheeler.
Right.
Uh, you're going to steal $1 million worth of art, you can put it in a briefcase.
I was just gonna say, like a Fabergé egg or whatever, I'm thinking to myself for one piece of whatever.
Yeah.
I mean, what pops into my mind, I remember I was in the academy and the King Tut exhibit was moving around the country. And I talked to a couple of coppers when I got out of the academy, and they're like, yeah, they had Egyptian guards with Uzis that were guarding this stuff. And, it was just a different level altogether.
People don't realize when you see a museum in Milwaukee, let's say, and they're going to have a Van Gogh exhibit. Well, the chances are that museum in Milwaukee may only own two Van Goghs, maybe only own one Van Gogh.
Right.
There's a finite number of Van Goghs out there. But for the exhibit, you're going to need more than that. So they call us, they call MoMA, they call the Metropolitan, they call the Chicago Art Institute, and we all donate a Van Gogh or
Hmm.
two.
Yeah.
So at some point before that opens, in transit is probably $1 billion worth of art moving around the country,
Right.
coming to the Milwaukee Museum for the exhibit. And then it has to go back. And it's reciprocal. In Milwaukee Museum might have Warhols, might have 10 Warhols, and
Yeah.
we're going to do a Warhol exhibit. So they'll send us. So anyway, this goes on all the time on exhibits. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Somebody
I,
tells me we're going to move a gazillion-dollar painting. We are? How are we going to do that? How? So that was a fascinating change.
yeah. Clark wants to
Huh.
say hi. But yeah, I just think about that. And yeah, that's just a world I have no idea. And I'm thinking to myself, okay, you steal this Van Gogh or whatever. Where are you going to fence it? You got to resell this thing.
There's and now I'm going to do a shameless plug. The third book I wrote is called Greed,
Yes.
and it starts in Paris with art forgery and art theft and works its way back to San Francisco. So I was able to parlay what I learned at the museum and talking to our people who do our restorations and conservatorships, et cetera, that they were hugely beneficial teaching me that. But you're absolutely right. There's a very limited market. And what you have are people like these Russian oligarchs and some of the princes in the Middle East who have no problem paying the money for it.
Okay.
And no one's going to challenge them.
But somebody's
Uh,
going to have to expedite that sale. It's all
yeah,
illegal. And
it's
that's
not
that's like Interpol stuff almost.
Yeah, it's not like taking a watch to the pawn shop. I
Right,
mean,
exactly.
it moves in a very, very limited circle, and but there are some really, really good forgers out there, and there are some pieces of art that are hanging in museums that are not originals.
Well,
And
I know you can't say, but I would think that the security measures for something like this would be, you know, incredible. I don't know how you would steal something out of one of those exhibits.
well, look at the Gardner in Boston.
Yes.
That's still unsolved. I mean, and it doesn't just happen. Art theft, armored car theft, it's an inside job. I mean,
Oh,
you can almost
absolutely.
bet on that.
Right.
So you got to have somebody who knows the systems. We were putting in new systems at the museum. So there was only a limited number of people who knew that system, but there was more than one. Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
And the security company that you're working with, the electronics, the electricians, all that stuff's going in. There are people who are watching it go in, people who know how it's wired. I mean, because
Yeah.
we're
Yeah,
brand
I
new
just
building.
think of Tom Cruise dangling from, you know, wires, working on pressure plates and all that other kind of
And
stuff.
it's not that, well, the other thing too is without giving away trade secrets,
Right.
when you hang a painting, or they use the term install, when they install a painting, uh, a lot of those paintings, the valuable one, the Matisses, the Van Goghs, they're electronically monitored. If that painting moves a quarter of an inch, you know.
Sure.
So it's pretty difficult to, and a lot of them are attached to they're not hung on the wall. They are attached to the wall.
Okay.
Uh, we had pieces of art when they installed the art that they literally cut a hole in the sheetrock to get to the studs and attach the painting and then put the sheetrock in behind it.
Wow.
You couldn't have got that painting off the wall with a forklift.
Dang. Yeah, yeah, I was just thinking about, you talked about the Gardner Museum heist that's still unsolved. That was from March 18, 1990. 500 million in art was stolen out of that heist.
And that news clipping is on the desk of every director of security at every museum in the country.
I do not doubt that. But let's talk about your books. Where did this start? Where did your authoring start?
It started in probably about 2017. When I had left the museum, I started like talking with you, and we're talking,
Yeah.
reminiscing. And over the years, 4 departments, 2 states, some private security stuff. Over the years, I've collected some interesting anecdotal stuff, and I put it in a file. And one day, I was talking with some friends about a story, and they said, "That's a great story. You ought to write a book." I said, "Okay, maybe I'll try." So that's kind of was the impetus to try and write something. And then I thought about, well, you could write about a particular case, kind of a true crime. But I really didn't want to write just about a case because, and I'm not knocking true crime, don't get me wrong. It's good stuff and there's some great
Oh
authors out
yeah,
there.
absolutely.
But it's one crime and it's really crime centric. And you really don't develop the characters very much.
Mm,
The players, they're really ancillary to the crime.
yeah.
So I wanted to do crime fiction. I wanted to take a real case or several real cases and create a case,
Yeah.
but make it about the investigation. Make it about the officers, the inspectors, the detectives who are working the case, and make it character driven. Make their interactions with one another, their interactions with their bosses, their interactions with the bad guys, so that they were uh, interesting and that people want to read about them. So that's kind of the way the story is developed. Character driven, based on a real occurrence or occurrences with a good, accurate portrayal of the investigation.
Yeah.
So, did one book. People liked it. I'm not Michael Conley yet. That's who I want to be when I grow up.
Yeah.
But the second book then was loosely based on a homicide case that I had worked, where a 13-year-old girl was murdered, and the story is basically that. Only it's moved to San Francisco, and it takes place in North Beach. And then the third book, which just came out last spring or in April, uh, moves into the art theft world,
And that's
and it
Greed, right?
starts,
That's your latest
and
book
then
is
yeah,
Greed.
and then it moves back to San Francisco because of greed. There's a homicide, and then the
Ah,
same characters. So the books deal with the same characters in all three books. They're sequential, but you can read them out of sequence. I mean,
okay.
they're not. You don't have to read one, two, three. It flows a little better if you do, and it's better for me if you buy all three. But there's so, uh, but you can just take them one at a time.
So you have three books out right now, and those are a series?
Yeah, pretty much a series, and
Okay.
they're. I think they're interesting to read. The reviews have been good. Again, I don't have an agent, and if there's one listening, call me. That's the push you really need if you're gonna sell a lot of books, and you work with the big four, the big five publishing houses because they're the ones that get it out there on the New York Times. They're the ones that do the nationwide book tours and that. I do book signings. I've done book signings,
Yeah.
and they're fun. I thoroughly enjoy them. I meet people. That's great,
Yep.
but you need somebody out there beating the drum for you, and
Now,
that's.
did you self-publish these books?
Oh boy, you're gonna regret that question. Uh, First one, I went with a publisher that you'll probably see on Amazon or any internet. Google published book, and you'll find a myriad of publishers saying, "Oh, we'll publish your book for $3,000,
Yeah.
and in
Vanity
5 weeks you'll be a
publishers.
New York Times best-selling
Yep.
author."
Yeah,
No, you
vanity
won't.
publishers. Yep.
No, you won't. You will be minus $3,000. I'll guarantee you that.
Yep.
But you will not be a New York Times best-selling author. And when you try and come back on people on not living up to the agreement, you'll find out that the companies frequently are not in the US and they're judgment proof. So I would warn anybody who wants to publish, stay away from these people. Number two, I tried, and I'm saying this because I learned the hard way. It was expensive, and I severed that relationship. I then went with Amazon and self-published.
Yeah.
And that's really inexpensive and it's quick. They're very respectful, very responsive. Unfortunately, you are one of 1 million books they publish.
Oh yeah, more than that
And if
actually.
you want to be seen, you're not going to you just fall into the flotsam and jetsam of published books. So I did what's called hybrid publishing. I went with a publisher, and I'll mention that the publisher is Palmetto, and they're out of South Carolina. And they published a book for a friend of mine who's a homicide inspector in San Francisco. And he said they treated him well. So I called them. I actually talked to the CEO or the president of the company. And I went with them and I republished the book I had the problem with them. So I've stayed with them and they've been very responsive and very good. The problem is they don't market your book. And that's where your agent comes in. And that's where places like Random House or Macmillan or one of these Penguin, one of these big houses, they have a whole marketing division. And that's how you get a lot of books sold.
Well,
But for them to like your book,
right, but
tough.
the problem though is 'cause I know a lot of mid-tier authors that are published traditionally, hybrid, and indie. And the ones, unless you're James Patterson or Stephen King, they'll push your book for, I don't know, a couple of months, somewhere in that ballpark. Then after that, it is entirely in your lap.
Oh yeah.
You got to take care of it no matter what. I mean, that's just, yes. You know,
You also find out quickly that if you're fortunate enough, to get to one of those places and they give you an advance. Now you're not going to get a big advance. And like you said, if you're
no,
Conley
right.
or Patterson or
You'll get a
yes,
big one, but if you're Pat O'Donnell, you're not getting a big advance. It's just not going to
no.
happen.
And if you get anything, and if you
Right.
do, it's an advance against sales. They're not giving you money.
Right.
They give you that advance, and then until you sell a certain amount of books and pay them back, you're not going to make any money.
Right.
So it's tough. It's a tough business, and there's a lot of people out there that want to write a book, and God love them. I think it's great. And there's people out there who have a lot of stuff to say and good things to say, and I wish them well. It's a lot harder than it looks, and publishing is harder than it looks. And the writing part. you got to commit to it. It's got to be a bit of a job. You have to look at it that way. I know most of these guys, like Conley, I had an opportunity to talk with him very briefly, and he writes every day.
Sure.
He gets up early, and he writes. And most of these good authors do that. They might only write 5, 6, 8 pages, but they write every day. It's their job. That's what they do.
Yep.
And I have great respect for
Yeah, I'm a binge writer. Like I said, I
them.
did hybrid writing, and the my publisher was, rapid release. So I wrote 4 books in like 6, 7 months. And those were
Mm,
70,000, 80,000 word books. And I had to work every day. You had to have the discipline, and you can do
yeah.
it. It'll drive you a little buggy, but you can do it. I don't know how sustainable that is. For some people, they've got that wired inside of them. I do not.
And right now, you start, AI stuff. There are people writing books with AI.
Oh yeah.
And the good news is the Copyright Office has got a pretty good algorithm, and they won't copyright your book if it's AI. And they're doing a pretty good job of sifting through what you send them, and denying you if it's AI. Now, that's not saying you can't use AI for research, much like you would use Google or any other
Right.
search engine.
It's almost like having a buddy. It's like, okay, I'm stuck on this chapter. Give me 5 variations of an outcome. And all 5 might suck what they give you, but it might trigger something in your lizard brain. It's like, oh, okay, you know what? I'm going to do this instead. So it's almost
What is
like
it?
having a writing buddy.
Chat GPT at the bottom of their page, it says AI can be wrong.
Oh yeah,
So,
absolutely. It
yeah.
could be very wrong. They
So,
make stuff up. Yeah, there's
mhm.
there's no doubt about that. But, AI just continues to get better and better. And, it's like electricity. People were scared to have electricity in their house. It's like the tractor, it's like it's here, it's not going away, and it's only going to get better. So you have a choice to either master it and figure a way out how to make it work for you, or just get out of its way and just put up your hands and just quit.
Yeah, it won't come up with the idea for your story. It won't do that. You're going to have to be creative, and it's
Or
not
it
going
won't do a very good job of it, that's for sure.
to. No. But the writing part, I still work. I do consulting work for a security firm here in the Bay Area, and I mean it's a great job. I mean,
Yeah.
the guy that started the company used to work for me, and he asked me if I help him, so I said I would, and he's doing great. And there'll come a point, I'm sure, shortly where I will be obsolete, but the but it's been fun working with him and watching the company take off and seeing what he's done with it. So I still do that,
Yeah.
but the writing part has been, and you've done it. One of my stories, I was stuck for a couple of months. I mean, I'd created this bad guy who I worked really hard on him, and he is clever and all. He's so good. I don't know how I'm going to catch him.
Yeah.
Uh, I,
Yeah.
I've painted myself in a corner. You can't have somebody who's clever, clever, clever through 10 chapters and then have them leave a fingerprint. That's
Yeah,
stupid. It's not going to happen.
exactly. You're
Yeah.
right.
So you got to come up with something that's out of the ordinary, that's believable, that could happen to somebody who's really smart.
Yeah, and
So,
I'm also a big believer in character-driven stories. I mean, people, they want, like a good character that they can sympathize with, have empathy for. They want, they want to be their buddy. They want to hang out and have a
absolutely.
beer with this person. Who doesn't want to be James Bond, for God's sakes? What guy
No,
doesn't want to live a
it's
James Bond life for a little bit?
No, you're right. And that to me, that's what I think is the separation between true crime and crime fiction, is the character.
Yeah.
I mean, I asked Conley. I mean, I hate to keep bringing Michael Conley up, but he's such a good example. I asked him that question. I said, is Titus Welliver Harry Bosch in your mind? Is that who you saw? Because I said it didn't for me. I had a whole different Harry Bosch in my mind. And
Oh,
when I
okay.
first saw Titus Welliver, it was like, oh God, that's not Harry. But today, it couldn't be anyone else.
Yeah.
That's Harry Bosch.
It's
Uh,
funny because, I have friends that are like, oh, Bosch is so great, blah, blah, blah. So I'm like, I don't watch most police shows on TV because they're just ridiculous and silly. And I'm like, okay, I'll give this a try. And I'm watching it, and there's like 100 different procedural things that are wrong with it. And I'm like, he's taking a gun and sniffing it. The girl who commits suicide, like the first one. There's no boss or a completely ineffective boss that lets him break all the rules, and blah, blah, blah. And but as time went on, my wife liked it, so I watched it with her. It's like, I like this guy. He's kind of a tortured soul. He likes jazz. I like jazz, and he does have a sense of humor. And then the side characters, Creighton Barrel, his partner was
oh,
awesome.
they're great.
That's what made that show.
The I agree with you. I think, and Conley, I saw him interviewed, and he said, Welliver has embraced the character to the point he said they're getting ready to shoot, and Conley said, um, I do the character. I'll do a rewrite. I mean, I'm very concerned, but the background is I let the studio, the writers for the studio or HBO, whoever's doing
Sure.
it, they handle. They got staff writers, but I handled the character. So he said I'd get a phone call. It's like middle of the night or whatever when they were shooting, and it's Welliver, and he says they want me to do this, and Harry Bosch wouldn't do that. He's so immersed in the character that he's
Yes,
now calling Conley saying, no, 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 they can't make the character do this because it's not right. And Conley said he was right. The character, so they changed it. But he said it's to the point now. Welliver is so Harry Bosch, he's thinking like Harry Bosch.
that's funny. Yeah, he's which can be a double-edged sword because as an actor, I mean, I'm not in Hollywood. I don't know jack squat about Hollywood, but you got to eat and pay the bills. And it's like there's only so many Harry Bosch kind of characters for you out there. You get
Yeah,
you
and
get plugged into that, that persona. And that's tough.
he's
That's tough to break out of.
well, that's one of the, and that you see that with TV. That's why
Yep.
you'll see somebody like on a show like Friends or Big Bang or something like that who have six, seven, eight, nine successful seasons that are making hundreds of thousands of dollars per episode walk away. And they walk away because they're being typecast.
Yep.
Um, Somebody becomes that person, like Jim Parsons, who plays Sheldon on Big Bang Theory.
Yeah.
Can you see Jim Parsons doing any other role?
No.
If you saw him in the movie with Kevin Costner, where they talked about the African American women who worked in NASA,
Oh yeah,
and
yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah.
he was in that, and he did a good job. And there was nothing his role, but
But
it
he
was a
was a
different
nerd
role.
there. He was an egghead.
He was still a nerd, but he
Yeah.
wasn't quite Sheldon. He wasn't quite
Right.
nuts. But you had to take a step back when you first saw him, and
Yes.
it's not Sheldon anymore, and they're all afraid of that. That they're gonna have this great successful run, and they can't be anybody else.
Right.
Uh,
It's
and
like
and it's valid.
I think of like Daniel Craig. I'm a huge James Bond, fan. But he actually has been able to parlay that. And he's had some roles after James Bond that you're like, he was like a Southern gentleman. And
Hmm.
what was that, Knives Out, I think, or something like
Yeah,
that?
he's done
Yeah.
two of those.
And he did a great job. And I'm just like, wow, that's not easy to do.
Well, he's a good actor. Actually, the James Bond characters, Connery's a good actor. I
Oh
mean, he's
yeah.
good, and Roger Moore was a good actor. Pierce Brosnan's a good actor.
Yep.
Craig's a good actor. They can do anything. But
Right.
you're right. For a period of time, you do enough James Bond, you're
You
James
are
Bond.
James Bond. Yeah.
Yeah.
You're James Bond for God's sakes. There's no getting around it.
But the public's great though. They pivot pretty well because when they first switched from Sean Connery to Pierce Brosnan, it was like, oh no, that's not James Bond. Sean Connery's James Bond. But
Yeah.
after one movie, Pierce Brosnan's James Bond.
Yeah, it
Uh,
was Roger Moore, I think, was after.
was it
Yeah,
whatever
yeah,
the switch was? But people embraced it and they moved right on.
yeah. They figured it out, but I still think the two best was Sean Connery for sure. He's the original. He's the OG. He is
Yep.
the James Bond. But Daniel Craig, especially Casino Royale, what I loved about it was the grittiness. This guy is a womanizing chauvinist. Frickin', he's a secret agent where he has one job. He works for the Queen.
Hmm.
and he's going to do whatever needs to be done and use whoever he has to use to complete whatever task he needs to complete. You know, no feelings, no, blah blah blah. Yep, he's a hired killer.
Yeah.
There's the opening scene where he's in that bathroom in that fight scene. My heart rate was going out of my chest because I have been in fights, where somebody was trying to kill me. It's happened like 2 times on the job. And when everything was done and over with, it says, "Yeah, I was going to take your gun and I was going to shoot you and kill you and your partner." Very matter of fact. And when it comes down to that, like I said, my heart's beating out on my chest, and I'm like, "Oh, okay, they did a good job with this. I'm impressed."
Yeah.
But you know what? We're running a little bit long on time here. Your latest book, Greed. Tell you what, if it makes it to the big screen, who would you want being the main character? Who would you want
You know,
playing it?
that's a really tough question. And you're not the first one to ask me that. And I'll tell you what's happening to me. I look at since I've been away from the studio, I don't follow the movies as close as I did. So I'm stuck back thinking about the actors that I saw on stage or on the set and the people that you had some interaction with. And some of the people that jump out at me to be characters, I love Edward Norton.
Oh yeah,
I think he's a great
absolutely.
actor. I think he can play any role. I think he would be excellent. I think Timothy Oliphant, who played in Justified, I think he
Mm,
would be excellent. I think then, of course, you look at the others, you go, well, someone like Matt Damon, I think is great. I think that's like these guys are now in their 50s. I
yeah.
mean, they're I think time is standing still, but it's really not. And I really don't know, to be perfectly honest with you, enough of the younger actors
Well,
that are out there
I
right
should have
now.
prefaced it with living or dead. So we've got
Yeah,
a time
yeah,
machine here,
yeah.
Brian. We got a
But I
time
like
machine.
the ones I mentioned. I do like, and I
Yeah.
like Matt Damon. I think he's. I mean, I'll tell you a guy who I really think is a good actor, and I wasn't enamored with him initially, was Brad Pitt.
Okay.
Brad Pitt's done a really good job. He's I think evolved into a really fine actor. Um, Leonard DiCaprio. I mean,
Sure.
stellar actor. I mean, these are all. I mean, you'd have to have. Yeah, to get those guys. You got to have Scorsese directed.
Yeah, you're
Yeah,
yeah, you
and
have
then
some serious juice there. Yeah, there's no
yeah,
doubt about
those
that.
are you're talking $25 million people. Uh, but yeah, if you could have those people play your roles, it'd be great. It'd be fun.
All right. Okay. Hey, do you know Adam Plantinga? He's a San Francisco PD sergeant, and he's a very good author. His career is really taken off.
Huh? No, I do not. But
Yeah, I
um,
interviewed him. He was a Milwaukee guy,
huh?
and he went to a Jesuit college, and of course, there's a girl involved, so that's how he wound up on the West Coast.
What did you go to Marquette?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. My old partner from the job, Boris, if you're listening, he's a Marquette grad. I've got a bunch of buddies that went to Marquette.
Al McGuire.
Yep, absolutely. All right, one more point for law enforcement. It seems like law enforcement's kind of at a low point, to say the least. What words of encouragement can you offer to those with all of your experience, to new cops or those who are, still doing the job that are grinding it out every day?
Uh, I think it's a great career. I loved my job. I enjoyed it. I think we're the buffer between the bully and the bullied. Um, and I think people need to see themselves in that role. And I think that's really important. Um, the vast majority, and I mean the vast majority of people that we work with, people who we serve in the community, love us.
Yes,
They want us there. There's a handful of people that don't care for us. And
criminals, they
that
don't like us.
handful's
Yep.
been there since, they had Sir Robert Peel and
Yeah.
the Peelers in London. I mean, it's existed throughout time immemorial. So I don't think it's any worse than it was in the 70s or when I was, on the street. But and as a matter of fact, oddly enough, it was more dangerous in the 70s as far as losing officers than it is today.
Yeah, you didn't have
We
vests, you
lost
didn't have
almost
tactics, you
double
didn't
the
have
amount in
right.
the 70s. So.
You didn't have the
That's
equipment or training that we have now.
oh, and we do have better equipment.
Yep.
We are better trained. We have all of those things, but it is a good job, and people really do, want you there. Um, and I think, sadly, I think a lot of young officers are reading the press releases, and have adopted, not all, some have adopted kind of a firefighter philosophy of, I'll respond to the call, but aside from that, I'm going to drive around with my window rolled up and the air conditioning on. And that's not good. That's not the way to be a cop. Your job is proactive. You need to be out there. You're getting paid to do a proactive approach. So I would hope it's a good job, and the salaries have improved. You can make a living, you can raise a family, you can do whatever you choose to do. However, I never would have thought when I started this job that I'd see police officers making six-figure salaries on the street. I mean, that's
Yeah.
unheard of, but it's reality. So yeah, I think it's a good career, and you can make a difference. How many jobs can you have where you can actually make a difference in someone's life, that you can actually impact somebody? And I think we need to push that with people. We need to let them know that that's out there, that that's for the taking, and you can actually do something special.
Absolutely. So what's next for you?
Um, I'm finishing up a departure book. This one's going to actually move up in new characters up into Wyoming and Montana with a militia group.
Oh,
So it'll be a little bit different. And the fourth book in the series with the San Francisco is about, I don't know, about two-thirds done.
okay.
I think I finally figured how to catch the guy. So I'm going to be able to move forward, get past that. And I've got some ideas for a couple of more, so I think I'm going to keep writing and keep after it. I still like it, and I think so far so good. The people who have reviewed the books have enjoyed them. I've got good reviews on Amazon and that sort of thing, and people who have come to book signings seem to have fun. And
Sure.
some of the Q&A is always fun. I love that part. That's people have great questions, and that makes my day. That's really a good time.
All right. Well, very good. Where can people go to find out more about you and your work?
Website is goldengatetales.com, and there's a forum on that you can click on. And if you want to ask a question or something like that, I'm usually really good about getting back to that. I
Okay.
try and check it every day and respond to people. And there's an email at brian@goldengatetales.com, and that's in usually at the tail end of the book. So if somebody had a question about the book or something like that. And again, I'm not going to guarantee I'll get you back in 24 hours, but I'll get back to you. I think I owe anyone who spent money to read the book a response if they have a question.
All right. Well, the name of the latest book is Greed. Brady, thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you. Appreciate it.